So the parsha we're looking at today is Va'era, and it begins with Exodus chapter 4, I believe. Let me pull it up and make sure here. It is, oh, let's get the right page. Begins with Exodus chapter 6, verse 2, Va'era. Every type you, oh, okay, I can't do anything with that. Okay, well, we know who everybody is, and so everybody is welcome to join us this evening. I see we're listed as for guests. If you're guests, please feel free to jump in with a comment, or maybe guests are all of us this evening. I'm not sure how that's working. So, we have two Hebrew words that go on in this text. Let me shift languages here. I think this is the one I want. Nope, that wasn't it. Let's try that button. Okay. Oh, so we're all guests. Well, welcome all guests. Okay, let me look up the word and make sure I spell it correctly. Okay. So we have het. Oops. Nope, not that one. I'm sorry, I don't have a list on my keyboard of which letter is where. So they are all a guessing game, and one of these days... Oh, I'm sorry to do this to everybody. There it is. Okay, so we have... We have chazak. You're familiar with the word chazak because when we finish reading a book of Torah, we go chazak, chazak, v'ni chazak. It's about being strengthened. We're being strengthened from the inside out. You know, God's giving us strength. We're going to strengthen each other, and it's going to be good. Now, the other word that we see show up in here, let me see how fast I can find all the letters. Oh, look at that. Great. This word is kaved. Kaved means to be weighty, to be heavy, like you've got stones sitting on your chest, like you've seen the TV commercial about COPD and the elephant is sitting on somebody's chest. That. And so that's kaved, and it sits something sitting heavy on your heart, weighing you down. It's not a really pleasant version. So we see that there are differences between these two verbs. What is interesting is how they show up in the actual text. If we look at chapter 17, verse 14, we see in this verse that Pharaoh is being kaved. And what is happening in 7:14 is when the frogs died out in the houses and they piled up till the land stank, and when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, Pharaoh became kaved, and he would not listen to the people. Right. It is related to kabod. It shares the same root. It's about weightiness and heaviness. So glory is something that really can weigh on somebody, and it's not, it can be tough. Glory is a tough word, and so we see how that goes. in the verse in, where was I? 7, 8. No. Okay, never mind. The magic, I'm in the wrong verse here. Okay, we got the first of the plagues, got the water being turned into blood. And we see here that water mayim is juxtaposed with blood, which is death. So we've got blood and death mixing together. It's almost like a foreshadowing of what's going to be happening. And then we see our first in verse 14 that God tells Moses that Pharaoh is stubborn. Kaved lev paro. The heart of Pharaoh is stubborn. It's heavy. It's weighted down. It's not going to be an easy challenge. The next, we left. Where'd we go? The next verse that we see is in 7:22, and the verse there is chazak. How did I miss 11? Okay, we see it in 11 too, and after the frogs piled up, then Pharaoh is kaved as well. We go on to 22. Am I in the right one? 7:22. Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, that's in 14. Okay, I didn't write my little notes here too quickly, did I? So in 7:14, then Pharaoh's heart is chazak. God made Pharaoh's heart chazak. Now, if God's trying to let the people go, then why is God strengthening Pharaoh's heart? Why would he want to do that? After all, his goal in life is to free his people. And yet here we see God strengthening Pharaoh's heart with chazak, v'ni chazak, Pharaoh. Why? What would be the point of strengthening Pharaoh's heart? And then we continue on in the text. And the next one we see is in 8:11. And no, 8:7. And I really messed this up, didn't I? 7:28, Pharaoh became stubborn. Again, we see the use of kaved. And then in verse 8:7, when Pharaoh inquired that not a head of the Israel livestock had died in the cattle plague, then again, Pharaoh's heart became kaved. Am I in the right place? Okay, that's in 9. I'm sorry. 9:7. There it is. Pharaoh's heart became kaved when he discovered the dead cattle were in his land, but not in Goshen. After the plague of boils, God chazaks Pharaoh's heart. Again, he makes it strong and strengthened. Then after the plague of boils, when God has chazak Pharaoh's libo, his heart, God says that he spared Pharaoh for the purpose of showing Pharaoh his power in order that God's name might resound throughout the world. Then we see a plague of hail. And this is the only plague in which the people of Egypt were warned to bring their livestock safely under cover. And there was no hail in Goshen, only in Egypt. And in 9 verse 35, the English says, so Pharaoh's heart was stiffened, and he would not let the people go. But the text says, the Hazak lev Paro. God Hazak. What do you think's going on in these passages? Okay. Troy says that Kavod is related to Kavod, glory, yes. And Troy says that God wants to show everyone his power and strength over the other gods. But, you know, the Torah doesn't necessarily rule out the possibility of other gods in existence. Wow, okay. Adi is back with us, David, and he signed in right using a link. Okay. Great, maybe we'll figure that out shortly. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the non-existence of other gods, but our God wants to show everyone he's number one out. Okay, sign out and sign back in. Let me see if I can do this. I will be right back, folks. Okay, it did not ask me to sign in. I guess it doesn't like me. And I don't see anything here that says sign out. Well, obviously, people are much more tech literate than I am. So now, Chanah is 510, 367. And Troy signed back in, so Chanah must be 34, 1, 41, 4. Well, something happened. Anyway, the top pull down on the right. Really? Okay. Oh, log in. Duh. Maybe I should try logging in there, huh? Yeah, okay. Agree to terms of service and privacy. Am I back with who I am? Oh, how nice. I have no videos. Oh, no. Okay. Restore social stream. I'm sorry to be so quiet. Oh, well, now I'm in guest. I can see you in Hartford. Okay. Well, hopefully now I have a name. My little white box to the right, it's only working if I put it on the pop-out box, so I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we were talking about the difference between chazak for Pharaoh and the difference in the use of kabed. In most translations, these differences do not show up. Oh, I am, huh? Shalom. Oh, there I am. Okay, great. So the differences don't show up in the translation. All of them say stubborn. All of them say Pharaoh's heart was stiffened. He was stubborn. The question is, why the difference between the verbs? So it was suggested that maybe God is showing his power, but why is God messing with Pharaoh? This is a free will question. If we have free will to say yay or nay and to give our opinion, why is God messing with Pharaoh's free will? Some of these instances, Pharaoh's about to give in, and just when Pharaoh's about to give in, God says, no, I don't think so, and tinkers with his free will, and the next thing we have is Moses and Aaron's being tossed out, and Pharaoh says, no, I will not let your people go. No, no, no. So this is one of those philosophical questions is, does God have the right to mess with our free will? If God can mess with our free will, then do we actually have free will? Do we have the ability to make choices of our own? Are we just puppets pulled by the ultimate puppet master with his little strings and sticks? How about some comments? Let's see what you have to say. We have Chanah, Troy, and David. I seem to be doing all the talking. Are you thinking about this information? Going with it? So what do we think? Shalom from Italy. Okay, David says he's a puppet, but he's okay with being a puppet. He's fixing our chat for us. That's good. We appreciate that. And number 358892. We have weird things going on, so you got a number right now, but you're not the only one. We're talking about the differences in Parsha Vayera from the book of Exodus. This is the second Parsha, and we're talking about the differences between kabed, where the verb is weighty and strong, and Pharaoh's heart is getting kabed in various places through the plagues. But on the other hand, we also see the use of the verb chazak to strengthen. At certain times, God is chazak chazak, v'ni chazak to Pharaoh's heart. And so we're looking at that because if God is pulling the strings, then where is Pharaoh's free will to make up his mind? And there are instances when he's ready to give in and he's just like, I don't have time for this, just take your people, go, yeah, fine, go away, don't bother me sort of routine. And then God chazak Pharaoh's heart, and he doesn't let the people go. So what about free will? Aha, Chanah, welcome back. Yeah, it's a deep question. It's a philosophical question because it involves free will and God messing with somebody's free will. So if God can mess with Pharaoh's free will, in essence, God can mess with our free will as well. So how does that impact the choices that we make in our life? Are we really making these choices? I'm sure if we asked Pharaoh, Pharaoh would have said, yeah, I'm making those choices. I'm the one doing this. We're talking about the book of Exodus, and we're looking at the second Parsha reading, and it starts at Exodus 2, and so we're looking at the plagues. And we're looking at how Pharaoh is using, how we see two verbs in the text. We see sometimes Pharaoh is being kaved, and sometimes when Pharaoh wants to do what Pharaoh wants to do, he's kaved and weighted down. But there are times when God wants Pharaoh to do what God wants him to do, and therefore the verb used in the text is chazak, like strengthening. And so God strengthens Pharaoh's heart at some points of the story, and Pharaoh strengthens his own. So it's an interesting juxtaposition between free will and not. But then Troy, if God can do what he wants, then how does free will play into it? As human beings, we supposedly have free will to make our decisions and choices. In the Garden of Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, the Adam and Eve made choices and got a consequence for that choice. But that was kind of a setup too, in my opinion. Because if I were to bring 6 bags of groceries home, sit them on a table and tell the kids the only bag they can touch is the one in the far corner, first thing to do would be to open all the other bags first. So I think there was a setup going on there as part of the maturing process to get Adam and Eve. Yeah, I would teach a beginning Hebrew class if there was enough interest. Perhaps, okay, Troy says, perhaps God is trying to teach us trust, that we trust him to do the best things for us, whether it seems good or bad to us. Does that kind of then put God in a parental position? Like our young children trust in us to take care of them? Are we now saying that we should use that same sense of trust and God can hold our hand and walk us through life, taking care of us? Sometimes God seems like the ultimate parent. But human beings don't always tend to listen. As our kids begin to grow and they separate from us and the family union, as they find their individual selves and they start learning who they are as people, then sometimes we come down hard on them depending upon what the circumstances are. Sometimes we let the leash out a long way, and sometimes we kind of have to bring it back in until they're old enough to stand on their own. and make their own choices. Do we then, if we use the analogy of a parent, do we then have the opportunity to stand on our own? Moses is doing what he's told to do in this story. Aaron is doing what he's told to do. In essence, Pharaoh is sort of being told what to do. But then when does God let go of the leash and say, you're now free to fly and be the little birdie that weaves the nest? So what are we going to do? How can we relate this story to our lives? What lessons can we take from this to apply to ourselves? We could take the lesson of trust. We could take the lesson that God cares for us as if God was a parent figure. I am not using a Tanakh. I am using the Torah. This is the Plout edition. I use this one because I highlight things in this text and I write a lot of notes in this text. And it's got Hebrew, English, and it's got all kinds of my notes and commentary on all the pages. But no matter which version of the translation we use, the Hebrew text is all going to be the same. So, yeah, see, look at all those pages of notes, handwritten notes. I write them in Hebrew, I write them in English, I highlight them, I highlight the text. It's a very busy book. I add my own tabs on the side, as you can see. So whatever Hebrew text you have, feel free to open it up because the Hebrew words don't change. It's one of the things that has kept us a people throughout the centuries, that we have been on the move. Right here is the beginning of our story that we are beginning as a people. So we went down into Egypt. We descended down, because you always go down into Egypt. It's like the dark, narrow place, the underworld. And we have to come back up and rise out of that space. And it's kind of like the Hebrew Book of the Dead that we talked about last week. And now we could look at these as being some of the challenges. Only instead of us having to go through the challenges. Okay. Well, the Hebrew words that I've typed in, I went ahead and I typed in. So we're only using those two particular words in Hebrew, chazak. And I can type that back in again for you. Now that I know where the letter is that I want. Okay. Hazak. And the other one is kaved. Okay. Well, we'll see you when you get back then. And so those are our two verbs that are put back and forth with one another. Okay. So we could look at these as labor pains. We could look at these as the ultimate hero's quest, where the hero has to go down into the underworld to bring back. I have Hebrew fonts installed on my computer, Troy, and when I switch to Hebrew, I hit my alternate key, and my pause key, which is the shift. So I hit Alt-Shift. I have Microsoft and I have Hebrew fonts in it. I do not have vowels. I do not have the music notes. So I don't have any of that. All I have are just the straight letters. Nor do I have the little map that you put on the keyboard. But this works for me, so I'm good. So we could, in essence, say that Pharaoh is the one going through the hero's quest to get to the other side. He's the one who is meeting all the challenges, and he has to accept each challenge, and he has to get to the other side. But when he gets through the challenges, he doesn't get the reward the hero gets. We get the reward. Our people are out of Egypt. We get to come up and ascend. Just modern letters then, yeah. They're just letters, yeah. Not cursive, just general print letters. I can, if you want, I can transliterate them this way. Het, Zayin, Kuf is Chazak, and then there's Kaf. Actually, in this one, Kaved, it's Vet, which is Bet, soft B, hard B thing. Dalet is Kaved. Then you'd be able to look them up. So we went down into Egypt. Now we're shortly about to go up out. It is said that Hashem showed Pharaoh everything because Pharaoh thought he was God. Well, we've heard in the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. What do we see you Brunner saying? The sun rises and the sun sets with Pharaoh. Pharaoh was God. And he believed himself to be God. And one of the purposes that we see with these plagues is to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Pharaoh is not God. God is God, and there is only one God, like our God, in the universe. The Torah doesn't eliminate the potential of other gods, but on the scale, they are like on a scale of 1 to 10, they're ones, and our God is like 10 to the power of infinity. So our God knocks them out of the ballpark. But one of the things we see happening is this juxtaposition. Let me see what else I had in my notes. We also see in the plague of frogs, Pharaoh is really fed up with all these frogs, and they are infesting everything, including his palace. But when Moses says, when do you want the plague of frogs to go away? Does Pharaoh say, right now? Now would be good? Go away, don't ever come back? I would. I wouldn't want the frogs still there. Right. And yet Pharaoh says, no, wait till tomorrow and get rid of the frogs tomorrow. Because he was testing God to see how precise God could be. Could God wait till tomorrow to eliminate the frogs? At a certain time and an hour, was God going to make the deadline? Like the one-upmanship up the baseball bat sort of thing? When we reach the top? And our user 045 says, and one not as number, but outside even the idea of number. You're right, David. He had his magicians try and deal with the rest of the plagues. They could recreate the plague of blood, a juxtaposition of life and death in the water, they could go ahead and do the frogs. But on the other hand, once we get to the plague of lice, it's all over. As far as, where'd my notes go? The magicians say this is the hand of God. And again, what do we see? Pharaoh's heart getting chazak, chazak, v'ni chazak by God. So God is like going to give him strength for the battle ahead. Pharaoh's not going to go down easy, so God's going to make it harder for him. So God is messing with Pharaoh's free will. He is messing with the Egyptian people to put together his purpose. What other comments do we have on this particular text? Or questions? I'll give you a few minutes because we have a bit of a delay here. I'll have a drink of ice water because it's a balmy 85 degrees here this evening. Let's see what you have to say. Ah, okay. 2:40 a.m. in Italy. We'll hope you have great weather there. Okay, Moshe changed to Sem's exact words so as not to offend Pharaoh. That's correct. So Moses was using free will. Was there a consequence from God? Or did he let Moses slide? Troy said it looks like God is making things better for some people at the expense of others here. Okay. And that's a true point, because even though God's messing with Pharaoh's free will, and the Israelites, the Hebrews are not affected. Well, we are glad to have you here, 045. You could type your first name in for us. Would love to know what your first name is, and we can call you by name. But yes, God is making things better for some at the expense of others. So it's like the people are pawns. We have the Hebrews on one side, the Pharaoh on the other, and we have the Egyptian people in the middle of the battle lines. They're like out on the field as the pawns. Well, welcome, Yehuda. We're glad to have you. And so the people are the pawns. They're the ones getting hit with the plagues. It doesn't seem to bother Pharaoh one way or another. Pharaoh is like a child with a temper tantrum, and he's going to have his way. And Pharaoh is not willing to acknowledge God. And God knew this before he sent Moses in. I think actually it was back at the story of the burning bush. Let me pull that page back up really quick. Okay. Test one, okay. So he's already predicting that the neighbors are going to borrow from the neighbors and the lodgers, the items in gold and silver. We we have Moses going, I can't do this job because of my stuff. And let's see. Okay, I'm not finding it out offhand. I should have looked that up previously. Okay. Well, I'll look it up and find it for next time. So, yeah, you're right. Troy says that God chooses some over others. He chose Jacob over Esau. Yeah. And he chose Isaac over his brother. So Yitzhak won the day. My mind is really missing today. So that is here's the cry, the boy, Hagar's son. Okay, my mind seems to be missing, but Hagar's son was the firstborn for Abraham, and God chose Yitzhak over Hagar's son. So what about the Egyptian people in general? Is it wrong, do you think, to use them as pawns? Is it fair for God to use people as pawns? Because we certainly see that happening here. Ishmael. Thank you, Troy. Thank you. It's been a tough week here. I've been caring for sick parents. Love of God. So how do you think this is going to end? Well, I'm hoping that you already know what the end of the story is going to be. There are some people who believe that, let's see, Pharaoh is not actually evil in this. God always has a plan, and if it's part of his plan, it's there. I don't think so. Ishmael and Esau, yeah. Maybe the plan contains both evil and good. Because in Isaiah we read in Isaiah, I create good and evil, which we see show up in the Birkat HaYotzer Or, in the morning prayers, that evil and darkness are really foundational parts of the universe. They're not created, they just exist. And the physicists can talk about the dark energy that's in the universe. And the light energy is everything we can see. but everything we can't is considered the dark energy. But without it, the universe can't exist. And then there's the possibility of Pharaoh being ambivalent instead of evil, because Pharaoh, like Jacob, struggles and wrestles with God. One of the Midrashim say that Pharaoh actually wrote the Michamocha prayer, Michamocha be'elim Adonai, who is like our God, and that Moses and Miriam only repeated the prayer. When we look at the prayer of hail, fire, and ice, it's a prayer. We look at the plague of hail. I'm sorry, I was on prayer. But the plague of hail is fire and ice. Just like blood and water, life and death, now we're seeing additional opposites. Fire, ice. So there's a lot of opposite items being mixed together in this plague that are going on. And one translation of Chazak is to combat weakness inside of myself. So when I am gaining strength and I'm strengthening myself for the battle ahead, I'm actually chazaking. I guess you could say that in English. And battling the enemy inside of me, and like FDR, we can say there is nothing to fear but fear itself, because courage is a vision. We can look at Kaved, and we're weighty and heavy because the enemy is outside of us. The enemy is the facts, the reality. Stubbornness is a failure of vision. Let's type that in. Stubbornness is a failure of vision, while courage is the vision. What do you think? What do you think of the idea of Chazak being an inward strengthening, that we're doing something to our hearts, to ourselves, in order to strengthen us for something coming up? Whereas Kaved comes from outside of us. So Chazak comes from inside as a strengthener. I don't like that. Strengthening process, while Kaved comes at us from outside. If I could type, maybe this would go quicker. There. Kaved comes from outside ourselves. Could Pharaoh be experiencing fear? And God's giving him, maybe God's not strengthening Pharaoh so much as maybe God is being helpful and giving Pharaoh courage to face the next challenge. Maybe that's what we have to do. Pharaoh has to face the next challenge, and rather than have it destroy him, God's going to strengthen Pharaoh. He's going to help him out, in a matter of speaking. What do you think? How does that inform your understanding of this text? Any comments? Another drink of ice water. No? Nobody has anything to say? Okay. Well, we're down to our last 6 minutes. So before we finish up, I'm going to give the end of the year OneShul discussion. You can, well, I'm not sure on this screen where you would do it, but you can go to the OneShul.org screen, and you'll see that little push-get-in button up at the top, where you can go ahead and make a donation. If you are looking for an end-of-the-year donation, in case you've got lots of money that you're trying to snap up every tax deduction you can, OneShul would really appreciate anything that you can give for support. So there is my spiel, because we love doing these classes and we love having you here and enjoying them. Okay, let's see what else we have. Troy says, perhaps God is teaching Pharaoh a lesson and keeps repeating the lesson until Pharaoh learns it. Yeah, that could be. That would be a very parental thing to do. We keep teaching our children the same lesson. When you teach a child to tie your shoes, how long does that take? It's not show you once and you got it and move on. You spend a lot of time sitting on the floor with your child practicing shoe tying. And every day when they tie their shoes, you sit on the floor and you practice shoe tying. And so sometimes lessons do get repeated. Sometimes the person receiving the lesson doesn't always get it on the first try. So the teacher keeps to repeat it again and again. There's a lot to think about in this parsha. There's a lot to think about the question of free will, the juxtaposition of death and life in Mayim, water, and Dam, blood, in the first plague. There's a lot to think about in the opposites of fire and ice in hail. There's a great deal to think about in the usage of the verbs kaved, which comes at us from the outside, and chazak, that comes at us from the inside to strengthen us. Oh, thank you, David, for sharing that. As men, we are dim, and therefore we need constant repeating. Laugh out loud. Yeah, okay. Am I to make an assumption that you might be one of those types of men that requires the nagging wife that we hear so many jokes made about? Someone to keep you on track? Might be. Okay, so do we have any other questions or any other comments that anyone would like to share? No, nicking, no. You don't want the lessons repeated that often, huh? Well, that's good to hear. On track. Yes, I do 5 things at once. Yeah, multitasking. I think we're all very good at that in the modern world. Life might be simpler if we went back to trying to do one thing at a time. Like, listen to God. You know, it's kind of hard to listen if we're so busy filling our lives with everything else. We don't leave any space for God. No tzimtzum. No space. Okay, well then I'm going to stop the recording. And feel free to stick around and chit-chat for a while.